Verify every boarding pass on this flight. No exceptions. Roman Caldwell's voice cuts through the tense first-class cabin, his hazel eyes locking onto the stunned flight attendant. A black woman's dignity hangs in the balance, challenged by prejudice in a moment that could change everything. Welcome, listeners. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below. Maybe you're in New York, Paris, or somewhere far beyond. What do you think happens next? Will justice prevail, or will the truth stay buried? Stick with us to find out. If you love stories of resilience and redemption, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for our latest videos. Share this with a friend who needs a dose of inspiration. Why was she singled out? Who's behind the confrontation? Comment your guesses and join us to uncover a tale that'll leave you speechless. Let's dive in. Terminal at JFK International Airport thrummed with the pulse of 1,000 journeys, wheels of suitcases clattering, voices overlapping in a symphony of urgency, and the metallic chime of security gates. Amid this chaos, Evelyn Brooks moved like a quiet current, her presence both commanding and serene. At 32, her deep brown skin glowed under the harsh fluorescent lights, her long jet-black hair cascading over the shoulders of a tailored cream jumpsuit that hugged her frame with effortless grace. She was no ordinary traveler. Evelyn was a makeup artist of near-mythic renown, her work crafted under a pseudonym, adorning the faces of Hollywood's brightest stars. Today she was bound for Paris, where actress Camille awaited her touch for a film premiere press conference that could redefine a career. In her sleek leather carry-on, Evelyn carried her arsenal, brushes, pigments, and palettes, each a testament to a craft honed in the shadows. The first-class lounge was a sanctuary of privilege, its air thick with the scent of espresso and polished leather. Evelyn sipped a black coffee, her eyes scanning the room from behind oversized sunglasses. She preferred anonymity, letting her work speak louder than her name. Her boarding pass, tucked into a slim wallet, bore the mark of Seat 1A, a window seat, a rare luxury for a woman who rarely indulged. The ticket had been arranged by Camille's team, a gesture of respect for the artist who could make a star shine brighter than the spotlight. As the gate announcement crackled overhead, Evelyn rose, her movements fluid, and joined the line of first-class passengers. Her sunglasses came off, revealing eyes that held both warmth and steel. The jet bridge felt like a threshold, a passage from the ordinary to the extraordinary. Evelyn stepped into the first-class cabin of Horizon Airways transatlantic flight, the space a cocoon of muted luxury. Plush seats gleamed under soft lighting, and the faint clink of champagne flutes punctuated the low hum of conversation. Passengers, mostly white, dressed in tailored suits and designer scarves, glanced up as she entered. Some looks lingered with curiosity, others with a flicker of judgment that Evelyn had learned to recognize and dismiss. She was here for Seat 1A, where she could watch the world blur into clouds, her mind already sketching the smoky eyes and bold red lips she'd craft for Camille. But before she could reach her seat, a voice sliced through the cabin's calm like a shard of glass. "Ma'am, I need to see your boarding pass." Tara Mitchell, the chief flight attendant, stood in Evelyn's path, her blonde hair pinned into a severe bun, her blue eyes narrowed to slits. Her uniform was immaculate, but her tone carried an edge that felt personal. "Coach or first class?" she pressed, folding her arms across her chest. Evelyn paused, her pulse quickening, but her face a mask of composure. She'd faced this before. Gatekeepers who saw her skin, her youth, her quiet confidence, and assumed she didn't belong. "First class," she said, her voice smooth as velvet, producing her boarding pass with a flick of her wrist. It was checked at security. She held the pass out, the printed 1A clearly under the cabin lights. Tara barely glanced at it, her lips pursing into a thin line. "That's not sufficient," she said, her words clipped and heavy with condescension. "Step aside. We need to verify this." The command landed like a slap, and Evelyn felt the weight of every eye in the cabin. A woman in 1C, Karen Ellis, a middle-aged blonde draped in a silk scarf, leaned forward, her voice dripping with disdain. "Honestly, some people think they can just stroll into first class," she muttered, loud enough for Evelyn to hear. Her companion, a man in a navy polo shirt, smirked, adding, "Check her ticket properly, Tara. Standards matter." The air grew thick, the cabin a stage where Evelyn stood alone. Her fingers tightened on the handle of her leather bag, the leather creaking under her grip. She thought of her mother who taught her to walk with grace through rooms that didn't want her. "I've shown you my pass," Evelyn said, her voice low but resonant, each word a deliberate step on a tightrope. "I'm not moving." Tara's eyes flashed with irritation, her authority challenged in a way she clearly hadn't expected. "If you don't comply, I'll have security escort you off," she snapped, leaning closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "We don't just let anyone up here." The words were a blade, cutting deeper than protocol, their implication raw and unmistakable. Evelyn's chest tightened, the sting of prejudice as familiar as it was sharp. She'd built her career on transforming others, but here, in this moment, she was reduced to a stereotype. Around her, the cabin held its breath. Karen Ellis scoffed again, her scarf slipping slightly as she leaned toward her companion. "Maybe she's on the wrong flight entirely," she said, her tone a mix of amusement and scorn. Other passengers shifted in their seats, some avoiding Evelyn's gaze, others watching with thinly veiled curiosity. No one spoke in her defense, their silence a weight that pressed against her. The young attendant nearby, a woman in her 20s with a nervous smile, hovered at the edge of the scene, unsure whether to intervene. Evelyn stood taller, her eyes locking onto Tara's. She thought of Camille, waiting in Paris, counting on her to deliver a moment of magic. She thought of the countless nights spent perfecting her craft, earning her place in rooms like this one. "Check the pass," she said again, her voice steady, a quiet defiance that echoed in the stillness. "I'm exactly where I belong." Tara's jaw tightened, her hand twitching as if to reach for her radio. The tension coiled tighter, a storm gathering in the confined space of the cabin. Evelyn's heart pounded, but her face remained serene, a portrait of grace under fire. This was her seat, her moment, and she would not be moved, not by prejudice, not by scorn, not by the weight of a world that too often refused to see her. The first-class cabin of Horizon Airways' transatlantic flight was a pressure cooker, the air thick with unspoken judgments. Evelyn Brooks stood resolute, her deep brown eyes locked onto Tara Mitchell's icy blue ones. The chief flight attendant's words, "We don't just let anyone up here," still hung like a bitter fog, their sting as sharp as the silence that followed. Evelyn's boarding pass, marked 1A, dangled between her fingers, ignored by Tara, whose pursed lips and folded arms screamed defiance. The cabin's plush seats and champagne flutes felt like a mockery now, a stage set for a drama where Evelyn was cast as the outsider. Tara's voice cut again, sharper this time. "Step back to the coach, or I'll have security drag you out." The threat was a whip cracking through the cabin's stillness. Evelyn's heart thudded, but her face remained a fortress of calm. She'd faced prejudice before, in boardrooms, boutiques, and backstage chaos. But this was raw, public, a spectacle designed to humiliate. Her fingers tightened around her leather bag, the creak of the handle a quiet rebellion. "I've shown you my pass," she said, her voice low, each syllable a stone laid in a wall of resolve. "Check it." Karen Ellis in 1C, her silk scarf slipping as she leaned forward, scoffed loudly. "This is absurd," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "She's clearly in the wrong place. Just get her out of here." Her companion, a man in a navy polo, nodded, his smirk a silent cosign. "Tara, do your job," he muttered, loud enough to draw a few approving glances from nearby passengers. Others averted their eyes, their silence a heavier verdict. The cabin was a jury, and Evelyn stood alone. Tara waved over a younger attendant, a woman in her 20s with a nervous smile that flickered like a faulty bulb. "Scan her pass," Tara ordered, her tone brooking no argument. The attendant, her hands trembling, took Evelyn's boarding pass and swiped it through a handheld device. Screen flashed green. Seat 1A confirmed. A murmur rippled through the cabin, but Tara's face didn't soften. "That's impossible," she snapped, snatching the device. "There's a glitch. She doesn't belong here." She turned to Evelyn, her fake smile a veneer over venom. "You're causing a scene. Move." Evelyn's chest burned, the weight of their assumptions pressing like a vice. She thought of her mother's voice, steady through years of slights. "They'll try to shrink you, But you stand tall. She straightened, her gaze unwavering. I'm not causing anything, she said, her voice a quiet thunder. You are. The words landed like a challenge, and Tara's eyes narrowed to slits. The standoff stretched, a tightrope stretched over a chasm of pride and prejudice. Karen Ellis leaned closer, her voice a stage whisper. Maybe she stole the ticket, she said, her words a spark in dry grass. A man in 2A chuckled softly, and the cabin's tension coiled tighter. The young attendant shifted, her eyes darting between Evelyn and Tara, unsure how to defuse a bomb already ticking. Ma'am, she stammered, addressing Evelyn, maybe just step aside for a moment. Her voice was a plea, but it felt like betrayal. Evelyn's lips parted, ready to respond, when a new sound broke the deadlock. Footsteps, steady and deliberate, echoing from the front of the plane. The cabin seemed to hold its breath as a figure emerged from the jet bridge's shadow. Roman Caldwell stepped into the light, his navy suit tailored to perfection, his broad shoulders filling the aisle with quiet authority. At 38, his hazel eyes gleamed with a mix of warmth and steel, his dark hair neatly cropped. He was no ordinary passenger. As the billionaire CEO of Horizon Airways, Roman was aboard incognito, observing his airline's pulse. Few knew his face. Fewer still knew Evelyn was his wife. The cabin's energy shifted, a tide turning under Roman's gaze. He scanned the scene, Evelyn's rigid stance, Tara's defiant posture, the passengers' frozen stares. His presence was a calm before a storm, and when he spoke, his voice was smooth but edged with iron. Ms. Mitchell, he said, addressing Tara by name, what's the issue here? The question was a blade, precise and unyielding. Tara faltered, her confidence cracking like thin ice. Just a seat dispute, sir, she said, her tone suddenly deferential, her eyes flickering with recognition. She straightened, smoothing her uniform. I'm handling it. But her voice betrayed a tremor, a hint of fear that she'd miscalculated. Roman's gaze shifted to Evelyn, a flicker of warmth passing between them, invisible to the cabin but as real as the ground beneath. He stepped closer, his presence a shield. Return my wife's boarding pass, he said, each word a measured strike. Now! The word wife landed like a thunderclap, and the cabin gasped as one. Tara's face drained of color, her hand trembling as she fumbled to retrieve the pass from the young attendant. She handed it to Evelyn, her eyes downcast, her authority unraveling. Evelyn took the pass, her fingers steady despite the storm within. She met Roman's gaze, silent gratitude passing between them. The cabin was a frozen tableau, Karen Ellis's mouth agape, her scarf slipping further, the man in the polo shirt shrinking into his seat, the other passengers caught between shock and shame. Tara stood rooted, her hands clasped tightly, as if to hold herself together. Roman turned to her, his voice low but resonant. You've disrespected a first-class passenger, he said, and embarrassed this airline. He paused, letting the words sink in. Explain yourself. Tara's lips parted, but no sound came. The cabin waited, the silence a weight that pressed against every heart. Evelyn stood tall, her boarding pass clutched like a talisman, her dignity a flame that refused to flicker. The confrontation had reached its peak, and the truth was about to break free. The first-class cabin of Horizon Airways' transatlantic flight was a frozen tableau, the air charged with the aftershock of Roman Caldwell's revelation. His words, "Return my wife's boarding pass," still echoed, a seismic shift that had cracked Tara Mitchell's facade. The chief flight attendant stood paralyzed, her blonde bun slightly askew, her trembling hand clutching Evelyn Brooks' boarding pass as if it were a lifeline. Evelyn, her deep brown eyes steady, accepted the pass with a grace that belied the storm within. Roman, the billionaire CEO of Horizon Airways, stood like a sentinel, his tailored navy suit a stark contrast to the chaos he'd just unraveled. The passengers, once quick to judge, now sat in the stunned silence, their champagne flutes forgotten, their gazes darting between shame and shock. Roman's hazel eyes, sharp with purpose, bore into Tara. You've disrespected a first-class passenger, he said, his voice a low rumble, each word a stone dropped into still water. And you've embarrassed this airline. He paused, letting the accusation ripple through the cabin. Explain yourself. Tara's lips parted, but her voice failed her. Her eyes, once cold and commanding, flickered with panic, searching for an escape that didn't exist. The young attendant beside her, her nervous smile long gone, stepped back, as if distancing herself from the wreckage. Evelyn stood tall, her cream jumpsuit catching the cabin's soft light, her long, jet-black hair a cascade of defiance. She felt the weight of every stare. Karen Ellis in 1C, her silk scarf now a crumpled afterthought. The man in the navy polo, his smirk replaced by a tight-lipped grimace. The other passengers, their silence a confession of complicity. Evelyn's heart pounded, but her face remained serene, a testament to years of navigating rooms that tried English. The Flight of Dignity by XAI is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 international license. She thought of her mother, who taught her to carry herself with grace, and she knew this moment was hers to claim. Tara stammered, her voice barely a whisper. It was a mistake, sir. I thought there was a mix-up with the seat. Her words were hollow, a flimsy shield against the truth. Roman's expression didn't soften. A mistake? He repeated, his tone laced with disbelief. You ignored a valid boarding pass and humiliated my wife based on your assumptions. The word wife landed again, a reminder of the bond that made this personal. Evelyn's fingers brushed the wedding band on a chain around her neck, a private anchor in the storm. Roman turned to the cabin crew, his voice rising with authority. Verify every boarding pass on this flight. No exceptions. The command was a thunderclap, and the attendants scrambled, their movements frantic under his gaze. The young attendant, her hands shaking, clutched the handheld scanner, her eyes darting to Roman as if seeking mercy. He pointed to Karen Ellis, whose smugness had evaporated, her face pale beneath her perfectly applied makeup. Start with hers, he said, his finger a judge's gavel. Karen fumbled with her bag, her hands betraying her nerves. This is ridiculous, she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. She handed over her boarding pass, her silk scarf slipping to her shoulder. The attendant scanned it, and the device emitted a harsh beep, its screen flashing red. Invalid. Flight 392, Miami. A gasp rippled through the cabin, and Karen's eyes widened, her composure shattering. That's a mistake, she cried, her voice shrill. Tara said I could board. The admission hung like a noose. Roman's expression hardened, his jaw a line of granite. So you conspired with Miss Mitchell to board illegally, he said, his words a verdict. You're not just in the wrong seat, you're on the wrong plane. Karen's mouth opened, but no defense came. Her companion in the polo shirt shrank deeper into his seat, his face a mask of embarrassment. The cabin, once a stage for Evelyn's humiliation, now turned its spotlight on Karen. Roman signaled to the jet bridge, where two security officers appeared, their uniforms crisp, their faces impassive. Escort her off, he said, his tone final. Karen gathered her belongings, her hands trembling, her scarf trailing like a fallen flag. She stood, her head bowed, and followed the officers out, her heels clicking a defeated rhythm against the cabin floor. The man in the polo shirt averted his gaze as if afraid of drawing Roman's attention. The other passengers sat frozen, their earlier judgments now a weight they couldn't shed. Roman turned to Evelyn, his voice softening, a private warmth breaking through his authority. Are you okay? He asked, his hazel eyes searching hers. Evelyn nodded, though the sting of Tara's words, "We don't just let anyone up here," lingered like a bruise. I'm fine, she said, her voice steady, but I need to get to Paris. Camille's counting on me. Roman's lips curved into a faint smile, a shared understanding passing between them. Then let's get you there, he said, guiding her to seat 1A, where she settled by the window, her leather bag at her feet. Tara stood alone now, her authority stripped bare. Roman faced her, his voice a quiet blade. You're relieved of your duties, effective immediately, he said. You'll be escorted off at our next stop. Tara's face crumpled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, but she nodded, her defiance gone. She turned, her steps unsteady, and disappeared toward the galley, a shadow of the woman who'd wielded power moments ago. Evelyn looked out the window, the tarmac a blur of lights in motion, Her heart still raced, but her breathing steadied. She thought of Camille, waiting in Paris, and the spotlight she'd help her claim. Roman sat beside her, his presence a quiet strength. He pulled out his phone, typing a directive to his team. Conduct a full review of staff training. Prioritize respect and accountability. Report by the end of the week. He glanced at Evelyn, his voice barely above a whisper. This won't happen again. Not on my watch. Evelyn met his gaze, her fingers brushing his hand. I know, she said, her voice a vow. The cabin settled, the hum of the engines a reminder of the journey ahead. The reckoning had come, and justice had spoken. Evelyn's dignity, once challenged, now shone brighter than the cabin's gilded lights, a beacon for all who dared to see her. The transatlantic flight sliced through the night, its engines a steady hum as the world below dissolved into a sea of stars. Evelyn Brooks sat by the window in seat 1A, her cream jumpsuit now slightly creased, her long jet-black hair tucked behind one ear. The cabin's earlier storm, accusations, prejudice, and Roman's thunderous intervention had settled into a fragile calm, but Evelyn's mind was already in Paris. In her leather carry-on, nestled beside her, was her sketchbook, its pages filled with a mood board for Camille Laurent. Smoky eyes, sculpted cheekbones, a bold red lip to evoke old Hollywood glamour with a modern edge. This was her mission, her art, the reason she'd endured the cabin's scorn. She glanced at Roman Caldwell, seated beside her, his hazel eyes focused on his tablet. His quiet strength anchored her, a reminder that she was never alone. As the plane crossed time zones, Evelyn flipped open her sketchbook, her fingers tracing the penciled lines of Camille's face. The actress, 26 and luminous, was on the cusp of stardom, her new film, a drama tipped for Oscars, set to premiere at a press conference in Paris's Grand Hotel de Crillon. Evelyn's job was to make Camille shine, to craft a look that would silence critics and dazzle cameras. She closed her eyes, visualizing each brushstroke, each blend of shadow and light. The memory of Tara's words, "We don't just let anyone up here," flickered, but Evelyn pushed it aside. Her mother's voice rose instead. "Your hands create beauty. Let that be your answer." Roman glanced over, his voice soft. "You're already working, aren't you?" Evelyn smiled, a spark of mischief in her eyes. "Always. Camille's counting on me." He nodded, his fingers brushing hers, a fleeting touch that spoke volumes. "She's lucky to have you," he said, then returned to his tablet, typing a follow-up to his directive for a staff training overhaul. Evelyn felt a swell of pride, not just for her craft, but for the man beside her, whose justice had restored her place. The plane touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport as dawn painted the sky in hues of rose and gold. A delay from the earlier chaos pushed their arrival 30 minutes behind schedule, and Evelyn's pulse quickened as she navigated the terminal, her leather bag slung over her shoulder. A chauffeured car whisked her to the Hotel de Crillon, its marble facade gleaming under the Parisian sun. The ballroom buzzed with journalists, photographers, and the electric hum of anticipation. Camille Laurent greeted her in a makeshift dressing room, her golden skin radiant despite her nerves. "Evelyn," she exclaimed, her French accent warm. "I knew you'd make it. I'm a mess without you." Evelyn laughed, setting up her kit with the precision of a surgeon. "You're never a mess," she said, her voice steadying Camille's jitters. "Sit. Let's make you unforgettable." The room was a cocoon of mirrors and soft light, the outside world fading as Evelyn worked. She blended foundations to match Camille's complexion, her brushes dancing across cheekbones to sculpt angles that caught the light. She swept charcoal shadow across eyelids, blending it into a smoky haze, then arched Camille's brows to frame her expressive eyes. The final touch, a bold red lipstick, vibrant as a heartbeat, transformed the actress into a vision of timeless allure. Camille watched in the mirror, her nerves melting. "This film is my everything," she whispered. "The critics are waiting to tear me apart." Evelyn paused, her hand resting on Camille's shoulder. "They won't see flaws," she said. "They'll see you, and you are enough." Camille's eyes glistened, and she squeezed Evelyn's hand. "How do you do that?" she asked. "Make me feel like I can conquer anything?" Evelyn smiled, her own heart lifting. "It's not me, it's you." The transformation complete, Evelyn stepped back, assessing her work. Camille was a star reborn, Old Hollywood glamour fused with modern fire. "You're ready," Evelyn said, and Camille stood, her silk gown shimmering as she moved. The press conference awaited, and as Camille stepped English, "The Flight of Dignity by XAI is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 international license." Evelyn packed her kit, her movements swift but deliberate, then slipped out, her work done. She lingered in the ballroom shadows, watching as Camille took the stage. Cameras flashed, journalists leaned forward, and Camille spoke with a poise that owned the room. Her beauty, amplified by Evelyn's art, was undeniable. Headlines would call her a vision, the night's true star, but Evelyn didn't need the praise. Her victory was in Camille's confidence, in the spotlight she'd helped ignite. She stepped into the hotel lobby, her phone buzzing with a text from Roman. "Done?" She typed back. "She killed it." His reply was instant. "Never doubted you. Le Jules Verne tonight?" Evelyn's lips curved into a smile, her fingers brushing the wedding band on its chain. "Only if you're buying, Mr. CEO," she wrote, his laughing emoji warming her. She stepped outside, the Parisian air crisp against her skin, the Eiffel Tower a silhouette in the distance. The day's earlier wounds, Tara's venom, Karen's sneers, felt distant now, eclipsed by the triumph of her craft. Evelyn Brooks was more than a makeup artist. She was a creator of moments, a weaver of dreams, and tonight she'd made magic. 3 months had passed since the storm in the first-class cabin, but its echoes lingered in Evelyn Brooks's heart like a faint pulse. As she stepped into the gleaming terminal of JFK International Airport, her cream jumpsuit swapped for a tailored emerald blazer, her long jet-black hair swept into a loose braid, she felt the weight of memory, the sting of Tara Mitchell's words, "We don't just let anyone up here." And Karen Ellis's sneers had left scars, but Evelyn's stride was unbroken, her deep brown eyes alight with quiet resolve. Today she was bound for New York, her leather carry-on packed with brushes and palettes for a Met Gala prep session, a commission that would place her artistry on one of fashion's grandest stages. Yet as she approached the Horizon Airways gate, a flicker of apprehension stirred. Would the cabin be another battlefield, or had the world shifted? The first-class lounge was a familiar cocoon, its leather armchairs and espresso-scented air a stark contrast to the terminal's chaos. Evelyn settled into a corner, her sketchbook open to a new mood board, bold metallics and soft contours for a client whose name alone drew gasps. Her phone buzzed, a text from Roman Caldwell lighting the screen. "Proud of you, always. Let me know when you land." Her lips curved into a smile, her fingers brushing the wedding band on a chain around her neck, a talisman of their bond. Roman, the billionaire CEO of Horizon Airways, had not just defended her that day. He'd vowed to reshape an industry to reflect her worth. As the gate announcement crackled, Evelyn joined the first-class line, her boarding pass for seat 1A, a quiet triumph. The jet bridge felt different this time, less like a gauntlet and more like a passage to something new. She stepped into the cabin, the plush seats and soft lighting unchanged, but the air carried a different charge. A young attendant, her name tag reading Maya, greeted her with a smile that reached her eyes. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Brooks," she said, her voice warm. "We're honored to have you." Evelyn paused, the sincerity catching her off guard. She nodded, her heart lifting, and moved to her seat by the window, where the world awaited her gaze. The cabin filled, passengers settling with the usual rustle of bags and murmured chatter. Evelyn watched, her artist's eye noting the details. A black teenager in coach, his headphones bobbing as an attendant offered him an extra snack with a grin. An elderly Asian woman, her carry-on lifted gently by a crew member who knelt to chat with her. The interactions were small but seismic, a tapestry of respect woven into the fabric of the flight. Evelyn's chest swelled, not just for the change, but for the man who'd sparked it. Roman's reforms had taken root like a quiet revolution. After the Paris flight, he'd launched a sweeping overhaul of Horizon Airways. Anti-bias training was now mandatory, with role-playing scenarios that forced staff to confront their prejudices head-on. Security protocols were fortified, ensuring no unauthorized passenger, like Karen, could slip through. Attendants were evaluated on empathy as much as efficiency. their interactions scrutinized through an anonymous feedback system that gave passengers a voice. Roman had personally reviewed the first reports, his hazel eyes burning with determination as he signed off on new hires trained in his vision. A cabin where every traveler was seen, not judged. Evelyn's thoughts drifted to that night in Paris, after Camille's triumph at the press conference. She and Roman had dined at Le Jules Verne, the Eiffel Tower's glow framing their table. Over champagne, they'd toasted to resilience, to change, to a future where no one would face what she had. "You're my why," Roman had said, his voice soft but fierce. "This airline carries your name, even if they don't know it." Evelyn had laughed, but her eyes had glistened, the weight of his words settling deep. Now as the plane taxied, Evelyn glanced around the cabin. A white businessman in 2C smiled politely, no trace of the condescension she'd once faced. A South Asian family and coach laughed as an attendant handed their toddler a toy plane. The crew moved with an ease that felt earned, their training a shield against the old ways. Maya, the young attendant, approached with a glass of water. "Anything else, Ms. Brooks?" she asked, her tone genuine. Evelyn shook her head, her voice soft. "You're doing enough." Maya's smile widened and she moved on, her warmth a ripple in the cabin's calm. The plane climbed into the sky, clouds unfurling like a canvas. Evelyn opened her sketchbook, her fingers tracing the Met Gala designs, but her mind was on her mother's words. "Hold your head high, no matter who tries to push you down." She'd done that, and Roman had ensured the world, or at least this airline, made room for her dignity. The memory of Tara's venom and Karen's sneers had faded, not gone but dulled by the reality before her. Horizon Airways was no longer a place of gatekeepers. It was a space where every passenger, from coach to first class, was met with respect. Evelyn's phone buzzed again, another text from Roman. "Safe travels, my love. You're unstoppable," she typed back. "Because of you." His reply, a single heart emoji, warmed her like the sun breaking through clouds. She leaned back, her braid brushing the seat, and closed her eyes. The cabin's hum was a lullaby, its rhythm a promise of progress. Evelyn Brooks was more than a makeup artist, more than a passenger in 1A. She was a force, seen and celebrated, her legacy etched in the skies, and the hands of a man who dared to change the world for her. And that's the story of Evelyn Brooks, a woman who turned prejudice into progress with grace and grit. What moved you most? Was it Evelyn's resilience, Roman's justice, or the ripple of change in the skies? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We can't wait to hear from you. If this tale of dignity and triumph touched your heart, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell for more stories that inspire. Share this with someone who needs a spark of hope today. Thank you for joining us from wherever you're listening. Your support means the world. Until next time, keep shining, keep standing tall, and we'll see you in the next story.